For 60 years, humanity had been the galaxy's good neighbor. When the invitation came from the Galactic Concord, a coalition of 43 species spread across thousands of star systems, Earth accepted with open hands and wide smiles. Humanity sent doctors, not soldiers. They sent teachers, not spies. They built hospitals on alien worlds and helped terraform dying planets. They mediated wars between species that had been killing each other for centuries. And when those species finally shook hands across tables built by human engineers, it was always a human diplomat standing in the middle, smiling like a proud parent. Ambassador Ilara Voss had spent 20 years doing exactly that. She was 61 years old, with silver hair she kept short and dark eyes that had seen the worst the galaxy had to offer and still believed in the best. She sat on the Concord's High Council as humanity's voice, and she had used that voice to talk down invasions, or prevent genocides, and broker trade deals that fed billions. The galaxy loved humans. They were useful. They were kind. And most importantly, they were harmless. At least, that is what everyone believed. The truth was more complicated. Humanity had built no great war fleet. The United Terran Navy was small, a handful of aging frigates and patrol ships that guarded the Outer Rim colonies. Earth's budget went to schools, to research stations, to farms that could grow food on airless moons. The warships gathered dust. The officers grew restless, and the galaxy looked at humanity and saw exactly what it wanted to see: a species too soft to fight. Captain Marcus Cole did not agree with this view. He was 44 years old, built like a man who had grown up under heavy gravity, with a jaw that looked like it had been carved from stone and eyes the color of a winter storm. He commanded the UTN Resolute, a light frigate so old that its hull groaned every time it dropped out of hyperspace. His crew of 80 called the ship the Coffin behind his back, and he pretended not to hear it. Marcus had spent 15 years patrolling the Outer Rim, watching the borders, reading the signals. And what he read worried him deeply. The Varath Dominion, a species of tall, insectoid warriors with armored exoskeletons and a culture built entirely around conquest, had been moving ships closer to human space for the past 3 years. Not enough to trigger alarms, just enough to notice if you were paying attention. Marcus was paying attention. He sent reports to High Command on Earth. Detailed reports. Maps showing Varath fleet movements. Intercepted communications suggesting military exercises near human colony worlds. He sent them every month, then every week, and then every day. The responses were always the same. Noted. Under review. Continue monitoring. Nobody cared. Nobody wanted to believe that the peace they had worked so hard to build was anything less than permanent. The Varath were not subtle about their feelings toward humanity. Their supreme archon, a towering creature named Drael Kethar, had called humans soft-blooded herdlings in open council. He said it with the casual cruelty of someone stepping on an insect. His species had conquered 11 worlds before joining the Concord, and they had joined only because the coalition threatened economic isolation. The Varath did not believe in diplomacy. They believed in strength, and in their eyes, humanity had none. Ilara had dealt with Drael Kethar many times. She knew how to handle him. Stay calm, speak softly, never show fear. It was like standing in front of a predator and convincing it that you were not worth eating. She was very good at it. But lately, the Archon had changed. He was no longer just mocking humans in hallways. He was making formal accusations. At the latest Concord Summit, held aboard the great station of Athavari Prime, Drael Kethar stood before the full assembly and pointed one armored claw at the human delegation. He accused humanity of cultural contamination. He claimed that human influence, their art, their music, their philosophy of peace, was weakening warrior species across the galaxy. And young Varath were questioning their traditions. Other martial cultures were laying down arms, and it was humanity's fault. "They spread like a disease," Drael Kethar said, his voice echoing through the chamber like grinding metal. "They infect with kindness, they weaken with smiles, and when the galaxy has forgotten how to fight, they will be the only ones left standing." The chamber was silent. A few delegates shifted uncomfortably. Some nodded. Ilara stood slowly. She smoothed her jacket, and she looked at the Archon with the kind of steady calm that had ended wars. "The Concord was built so that no species would need to fight," she said. "If peace is a disease, then I am proud to be a carrier." There was nervous laughter. A few species applauded. The moment passed. The summit moved on to trade agreements and border disputes. Drael Kethar sat down, but his eyes never left the human delegation. There was something in those black, compound eyes that Ilara had not seen before. It was not anger. It was decision. That night, Ilara returned to her quarters aboard the station. She poured herself a glass of water and sat by the viewport, looking out at the stars. Her hands were shaking. She held them together and pressed them against her knees until they stopped. She had been doing this for 20 years, standing between monsters and the people they wanted to hurt, armed with nothing but words and the stubborn belief that words were enough. And for 20 years, they had been. But tonight, for the first time, she was not sure. She thought about calling Marcus Cole. They had met once, years ago, at a military review she had attended as a formality. He had told her, bluntly and without decoration, that the Vereth were going to attack. She had smiled and thanked him for his vigilance and moved on. She wished she had listened. Far away, on the edge of human space, Marcus Cole stood on the bridge of the Resolute and stared at his sensor display. The 12 Vereth warships had just completed a formation drill less than 2 light-years from the colony world of Eden's Reach. 12 warships. That was not an exercise, that was a rehearsal. He opened a channel to Earth. He sent his report. He waited. The response came 4 hours later. 2 words. "Continue monitoring." Marcus closed the channel. He looked at his bridge crew. 80 men and women in faded uniforms aboard a ship that could barely outrun a cargo freighter. Then he looked at the sensor display, at the 12 red dots sitting like wolves outside a fence. And he knew, with the certainty of a man who had spent his entire life watching for danger, that the fence was about to come down. He just did not know that when it did, it would not be 12 ships. It would be 2,000. Eden's Reach was the kind of world that made people believe in the future. It was green from pole to pole, endless rolling farmlands, crystal rivers, a forest so thick with life that the air itself tasted sweet. 14 million people lived there, farmers, scientists, teachers, families who had left the noise of Earth to build something quiet and good on the edge of known space. There were no military bases, no weapons factories, no orbital defense platforms. There was a school in every town, a hospital in every city, and flower gardens that children planted along the roads because someone had decided long ago that every road on Eden's Reach should be beautiful. It was the softest target in the galaxy, and the Vereth Dominion knew it. They came at dawn, local time. 2,000 warships dropped out of hyperspace in a ring around the planet, so close together that their hulls nearly touched. The first thing they did was kill the communications. Every satellite, every relay station, every signal tower, gone in seconds. Eden's Reach went silent. No distress call, no warning. And no cry for help reached the stars. Then the bombardment began. The Varath did not use precision strikes. They did not target infrastructure or government buildings. They burned everything. Plasma fire fell from the sky like rain, turning green fields into black glass. Cities that had taken decades to build were reduced to ash in minutes. The rivers boiled. The forests became walls of fire that stretched from horizon to horizon. And then the ground troops came. and they landed in thousands, tall, armored, insectoid soldiers carrying weapons designed not just to kill but to terrify. They moved through the ruins with mechanical efficiency, hunting survivors. They kicked open shelters. They dragged people from basements. They did not take prisoners. Lena Okoro was 29 years old. She was a teacher at the Greenfield Primary School in the town of Millhaven, and when the sky turned red, she was reading a story to her class of 32 children. The explosion knocked her off her feet. The ceiling cracked. Dust poured down like snow. The children screamed. Lena did not scream. She grabbed the nearest children and ran. She knew about the emergency tunnels beneath the school, old mining shafts from the colony's early days, sealed and forgotten. She broke the lock with a fire extinguisher, shoved children into the darkness, and went back for more. She made 4 trips. She saved 19 children. She could not save the rest. In the tunnel, in the dark, she held the children close and listened to the world above them die. The ground shook. The walls cracked. Dust filled their lungs. A boy named Thomas, who was 7, asked her when his mother was coming. Lena held his hand and told him soon. She knew it was a lie. Lena had a data pad with her, a simple device she used for lesson plans and attendance records. When the shaking stopped and the sounds above turned from explosions to silence, a moment. That if no one remembered what moment, that if no one remembered what happened here, it would be as if it never happened at all. She recorded for 3 days. She recorded the sounds, the distant crashes, the hum of Verath patrol ships, the crying of children. She recorded the faces of the survivors she found as she moved through the tunnels. Broken people, burned people, people who stared at nothing and could not speak. She recorded the moment she climbed to the surface and saw what had become of Millhaven. There were no buildings. There were no trees. There was only black, cracked earth stretching to the horizon under a sky choked with smoke. She recorded everything, and she did not stop. 18 hours away, Marcus Cole was already moving. The Resolute had picked up the energy signatures, the massive, unmistakable flare of 2,000 ships entering real space at the same time. His sensor officer looked at the readings and turned pale. Marcus did not wait for orders. He pushed the Resolute to maximum speed and aimed for Eden's reach. He knew he was too late. The math was simple and cruel. 18 hours at full burn. The bombardment would last minutes. But he went anyway, because there was nothing else to do, and because Marcus Cole was not the kind of man who could sit still while people died. When the Resolute arrived, Eden's reach looked like a corpse. The green was gone. The planet was gray and black, wrapped in a shroud of smoke and ash. The Verath fleet had already withdrawn. They had done what they came to do, and they saw no reason to stay. Marcus brought the Resolute into low orbit and began scanning for life signs. He found them, scattered, faint. For fewer than 12,000 out of 14 million. He sent shuttles to the surface. He went down himself. He walked through what had been the capital city of New Harmony and found nothing standing taller than his waist. The ground crunched under his boots, not from rubble, but from glass. The heat had turned the soil to glass. He walked until he found a school, or what had been a school. The walls were melted stumps. The roof was gone. Inside, tiny desks lay overturned and charred. A small chair sat perfectly upright in the middle of the room, untouched, as if the fire had gone around it. On a blackened wall, half destroyed by heat, a child's drawing was still pinned in place. It showed a blue and green circle, Earth, with a smiling sun above it and stick figures holding hands below. Marcus stood in that room for a long time. He did not move. He did not speak. He did not cry. And the men and women who served under him would later say that something changed in him at that moment. The man who walked into that school was not the same man who walked out. Something behind his eyes, something warm and patient and willing to give the galaxy the benefit of the doubt, simply closed, like a door shutting, like a light going out. They found Lena Okoro in the tunnels beneath Greenfield Primary with 19 children and 43 other survivors. She was dehydrated. "Call," she said. "Everything they did all," she said. "Everything they did. Every moment. Promise me someone will see this." Marcus took the data pad. He held it carefully as if it were made of glass. "Everyone will see it," he said. The survivors were evacuated. Medical ships arrived from neighboring systems. The Concorde sent a humanitarian observation team that walked through the ashes. I took notes on their tablets and expressed deep concern. Marcus watched them with a face made of stone and said nothing. 2 days later, the Vareth Dominion presented a formal report to the Galactic Concorde. The report claimed that Eden's Reach had been a covert military staging ground used by humanity to prepare for aggressive expansion. The attack, according to the Varath, was preemptive self-defense. The report was detailed, professional, and a complete lie. Half the council believed it, or pretended to. The Varath were powerful, and powerful species were expensive to oppose. Ambassador Alara Voss stood before the council and demanded justice. She showed evidence. She cited treaties. She appealed to every principle the Conquered claimed to stand for. The council voted to open a formal investigation, a process that, in Conquered history, had never once resulted in consequences for anyone. Ilara looked at the faces around the chamber. Her documents straightened her jacket. Her documents straightened her jacket, and walked out of the chamber without another word. That night, a single encrypted transmission left the Conquered station and traveled across the galaxy to Earth's High Command. It contained 2 files. The first was Lena Okoro's footage, every minute, unedited, raw. And the second was a text message from Ambassador Alara Voss. It contained 3 words: "No more diplomacy." On Earth, the message arrived at 3:47 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time. By 4 a.m., it had reached every member of the High Command. By sunrise, the world would know what happened to Eden's Reach. And by sunset, humanity would begin to remember what it really was. The footage aired on every screen on Earth at 6 in the morning. There was no warning, no introduction, no commentary, just the raw, unedited recording from Lena Okoro's datapad, the shaking ground, the screaming children, the sky on fire, the long dark hours in the tunnels, and then the surface, the black glass, the ruins, the silence of a world that had held 14 million living, breathing souls, and now held almost none. Earth watched, every city, every town, every home. People stood in kitchens with coffee growing cold in their hands. They sat on the edges of beds. And they gathered in public squares and stared at the massive screens that played the footage on a loop. Children were kept home from school, offices emptied, the streets went quiet. For 1 full day, the planet did not speak. It was as if the entire species had taken a single collective breath and held it. And then, slowly, the breath came out. Not as a scream, not as panic, not as sorrow, though there was sorrow, deep and terrible and old. It came out as something else, something quiet, something cold, something that had been sleeping inside the bones of the species since the first human had picked up a rock to defend the ones they loved. The world did not fall apart. It came together. Within 48 hours, every nation on Earth had committed to a unified war footing. Factories that made farming equipment began producing weapons. Shipyards that built cargo vessels were cleared and rebuilt in days. Engineers who designed hospitals now designed warships. And the transition was so fast, so organized, so impossibly smooth, that alien observers would later describe it as disturbing. As if the entire civilization had been waiting for this, as if beneath all the kindness and the diplomacy and the open hands, there had always been a clenched fist. They were not wrong. The galaxy did not know about Project Leviathan. Nobody did, outside of a very small circle within Earth's government. It had been running for 60 years, since the very first day humanity joined the Galactic Concord. While the diplomats smiled and shook hands and built bridges, a different group of people had been building something else. Deep inside hollowed-out asteroids in the Sol system, inside bunkers buried beneath the surface of Luna, inside stations hidden in the dark spaces between planets where no one ever looked, humanity had been constructing a war machine, thousands of warships, and dreadnoughts the size of small cities, fighters that could outrun light, weapons systems based on physics that no other species in the Concord had even begun to understand. All of it built quietly, carefully, piece by piece, year by year, behind the smiling face of a species that everyone believed was too gentle to fight. The reasoning was simple, and it was written in the very first line of the Leviathan Charter. We hope to never use this. We prepare for the day we must. Now that day had come. Director Samir Hadid was appointed War Speaker of the United Terran Government, a title that had not existed since humanity's last great war centuries ago. He was 57, thin as a blade, with a mind that moved like a chess player's and a voice that could make a room go silent just by speaking. He addressed Earth in a broadcast that lasted exactly 4 minutes. They killed our children, he said. They burned our world. And when we asked the galaxy for justice, the galaxy shrugged. So we will find justice ourselves, not with anger, not with cruelty, but with a resolve that will never waver, and a strength that will never be questioned again. The galaxy's response came quickly. The Concord dispatched an envoy to Earth, a delegation of 3 species, chosen for their diplomatic experience. They arrived at Earth's capital and were received with perfect politeness, and they were given comfortable chairs and hot tea and small sandwiches. Then Director Hadid sat across from them and listened as they urged restraint and measured response and respect for conquered process. When they finished, Hadid set down his teacup and said, "You had your chance to measure. We will not be measuring." The envoys left Earth that afternoon. Their report to the Concord was 3 words. They are coming. Marcus Cole received his promotion aboard the Resolute and transmitted by direct order from High Command. He was no longer a captain. He was Fleet Commander, the highest operational rank in the Terran Navy. His new ship was waiting for him at the Luna shipyards, the UTN Prometheus, a dreadnought-class vessel that had been built inside a hollowed moon and had never seen starlight. The Prometheus was enormous. Its hull was black, coated in a material that absorbed light and sensor waves, making it nearly invisible against the darkness of space. It carried weapons that had no names, only project numbers. Its engines could fold space in ways that would take the Concord's best scientists decades to understand. When Marcus first walked onto its bridge, he stopped in the doorway and stared. The bridge crew stood at attention. Every single one of them had volunteered. Every single one of them had seen the footage from Eden's Reach. "At ease," Marcus said quietly. He walked to the command chair and sat down. It fit him, like it had been built for him. Perhaps it had. Across the Sol system, the Leviathan fleet was waking up. Ships emerged from asteroid fields and lunar caverns and hidden dry docks, thousands of them, ranging from fast attack corvettes to carriers that could deploy entire fighter wings. They formed up in perfect silence, filling the space around Earth with a constellation of steel and fire. Ambassador Ilara Voss arrived at Luna shipyard on a civilian transport. She had resigned from the Concord 3 days earlier. Her letter of resignation was 1 sentence. "I cannot represent humanity to a body that does not consider humanity worth protecting." She was offered a position in the War Cabinet, senior diplomatic advisor, a role that would keep her in comfortable offices far from danger. She declined. Instead, she enlisted, At 54 years old, she walked into a recruitment center, filled out the paperwork, and requested assignment as a communications officer aboard the Prometheus. The recruitment officer stared at her. "Ambassador, I'm not an ambassador anymore," Ilara said. "Process the paperwork." When she boarded the Prometheus, Marcus Cole met her at the airlock. They had met once before, years ago, when she had smiled and ignored his warnings. Neither of them mentioned it. "Welcome aboard, Officer Voss," Marcus said. "Thank you, Commander," she replied. "I spent 20 years talking. I'd like to watch now, if that's all right." Marcus almost smiled. Almost. Lena Okoro was also aboard, though not as a soldier. She had been asked, gently, carefully, to serve as a civilian witness to the campaign, a recorder, a keeper of truth. She had agreed because she understood something that most people did not. Wars are not only fought with weapons, they are fought with memory. And if no one remembers the truth, then the truth dies, and only the lies survive. She set up a small workspace in a corner of the Prometheus and continued recording. On the 4th day after the footage aired, the Leviathan fleet was ready. 4,000 warships, crewed by men and women who had volunteered from every nation on Earth. They gathered in formation around Sol, a wall of metal and purpose that stretched across the darkness. Director Hadid gave the order at midnight, Greenwich Mean Time. A single word, transmitted to every ship simultaneously. "Go!" The fleet folded into hyperspace. 4,000 ships, moving as one, vanishing from real space in a flash of light, so bright it was visible from Earth's surface. People looked up from their homes and saw the sky flare white for a single heartbeat. Some of them saluted. Some of them prayed. Some simply watched. Across the galaxy, every species with long-range sensors detected the energy signature. It was so massive, so concentrated, and so impossibly large that 3 civilizations initially classified it as a natural disaster, a supernova, a collapsing star, something cosmic and impersonal. Then they analyzed the readings more carefully. Then they realized what it was. Then they were afraid. On Vareth Prime, the Supreme Archon Drael Kethar sat in his war chamber and received the sensor report. His advisors stood around him in nervous silence. He read the data twice. Then he looked up. "How many ships do the humans have?" he asked. No one answered, because no one knew. And because the number on the report was so large that saying it out loud felt like admitting something that no one in the room wanted to believe. The hurtlings were coming, and they were not smiling anymore. There was no announcement, no declaration of war, no formal communication, no transmission demanding surrender or threatening consequences. The Varath had not announced themselves before Eden's reach, and they had simply come and killed, so humanity returned the courtesy, not the killing, the silence. The Terran fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the Cythera Rift, a wide corridor of open space that served as the main highway into Varath-controlled territory. 600 Varath warships were stationed there, arranged in a defensive formation that their commanders considered unbreakable. It was the largest forward fleet the Dominion had ever assembled, bristling with weapons and crewed by their finest warriors. Marcus Cole sat in the command chair of the Prometheus and looked at the tactical display. 600 red icons. His fleet outnumbered them nearly 7-1, but numbers were only part of the story. The real difference was something the Vareth did not yet understand. "Weapons free," Marcus said. The Battle of Cythera Rift lasted 11 minutes. The Vareth had never encountered human weapons technology, the real technology, not the outdated systems on patrol frigates. Kinetic lances punched through their shields as if the shields were not there. Each lance was a slug of ultra-dense metal accelerated to a fraction of light speed, and when it hit a Varath warship, the ship did not explode. It came apart. It shattered, like glass struck by a hammer, pieces spinning silently into the void. AI-guided torpedo swarms moved through the Varath formation like schools of fish, adjusting course in real time, communicating with each other, finding gaps in armor and exploiting them with surgical precision. Electronic warfare suites reached into the Varath ship's own computer systems and turned them against their crews. Weapons locked, engines cut, navigation scrambled, ships drifted helplessly while the torpedoes closed in. The Varath tried to fight. They were warriors. Fighting was all they knew. But they were fighting something they did not understand, and by the time they began to adapt, it was already over. 600 warships. 11 minutes. Not a single Terran vessel was lost. The wreckage of the Varath fleet drifted through the Sathara Rift like a field of metal bones. Marcus looked at it on the view screen and felt nothing. He had expected to feel something. Satisfaction, maybe, or guilt, or rage. But there was only a cold, clear emptiness, like a machine running exactly as designed. "Set course for the next target," he said. "All ships. Maintain formation." The campaign that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The Terran fleet moved through Varath space like a storm, not wild, not chaotic, but controlled, precise, terrifyingly efficient. They struck military targets only. Shipyards were reduced to rubble. Orbital defense platforms were dismantled. Weapons depots were vaporized. Every base, every dock, every installation that could build or support a warship was found and destroyed. But human ships did not fire on civilian populations. They did not bomb cities. They did not burn farmlands. When the fleet passed over Varath colony worlds, the civilians below looked up at the sky full of human warships and waited for the fire to come. It did not come. The ships simply moved on, leaving the civilians untouched and confused. Marcus had given the order himself, and it was absolute. "We are not them," he told his fleet. "We will never be them. Any ship that fires on a civilian target will be relieved of command immediately. There are no exceptions." Some of his officers struggled with this. They had seen the footage from Eden's Reach. They had seen the schoolroom. They wanted the Varath to feel what humanity had felt. Marcus understood the desire. He felt it himself, like a fire burning in the back of his skull. But he kept the fire behind the door, because he knew that the moment they crossed that line, what to do. She did not lecture or preach what to do. She did not lecture or preach. She simply existed as a reminder, a living, breathing witness who carried the memory of 14 million dead and who would not let that memory be used to justify becoming monsters. Once, then after a particularly brutal engagement where a Varath battlecruiser had rammed a Terran destroyer in a suicide attack, killing 200 crew, Marcus found Lena in her workspace, staring at her datapad. "Are you all right?" he asked. "Are you?" she replied. He did not answer. She did not push. They sat in silence for a while, and then Marcus went back to the bridge and continued the campaign. The Galactic Concord watched all of this with a mixture of terror and shame. The species that had voted to investigate the massacre of Eden's Reach now watched as the species they had failed dismantled one of the most powerful military forces in the galaxy with the ease of someone clearing a table. Several Concord species began evacuating their border systems, not because they were at war with humanity, but because the sheer scale of Terran military power was so far beyond what anyone had imagined that simply being nearby felt dangerous. A Concord diplomat appeared on a galactic broadcast, stammering, trying to explain the situation to citizens who were demanding answers. "We thought they were pacifists," the diplomat said. Somewhere on an open channel that should have been secure, a human voice responded. It was calm, flat, and carried no anger. "No," it said. "We were patient." The Varath fought back with everything they had. They consolidated their remaining fleets, they fortified their core systems, and they called on their allies within the Concord to honor defense treaties. Not a single species answered. The Verath had no friends. They had only subjects and enemies, and now they had only enemies. Drael Kethar, the Supreme Archon, broadcast a rallying cry to his people. He called the humans cowards. He called them vermin. He swore that the Dominion would grind them to dust. His words were fierce and full of fire, but behind the words, there was something new in his voice. Something that his species did not have a word for, because they had never needed one. It was fear. The campaign lasted 6 weeks. In that time, the Terran fleet destroyed over 3,000 Verath military vessels, 47 orbital shipyards, 112 defense platforms, and every weapons factory in Verath space. They did this without once targeting a civilian installation. The precision was almost insulting, as if humanity was saying very clearly that they could tell the difference between a soldier and a child, and they expected the Verath to notice. Elara Voss sat at her communications station on the Prometheus through all of it. She monitored channels, logged transmissions, and watched the war unfold on her screens. She did not speak much. She did not need to. She had spent 20 years talking, and talking had not saved Eden's reach. Now she watched, and in watching, she understood something she had not understood before. Peace was not the absence of strength. Peace was what you chose to do when you had all the strength in the world and did not use it to destroy. Humanity had been at peace for 60 years, not because it could not fight, but because it had chosen not to. And now that it was fighting, it chose to fight with discipline, with restraint, with a grinding precision that left no doubt about the outcome, but also left no stain on the conscience. On the 43rd day of the campaign, the Terran fleet arrived at Verath Prime. Marcus Cole stood on the bridge of the Prometheus and looked at the view screen. The Verath homeworld hung in space, a reddish-brown sphere with dark oceans and jagged mountain ranges. It was home to 9 billion Verath, warriors, workers, children, families. The Terran fleet filled the sky, thousands of warships, fell across the entire dayside hemisphere. The shadow of the fleet fell across the entire dayside hemisphere. Marcus opened a communication channel, a single open broadcast to every device on the planet. First, he transmitted Lena's footage from Eden's reach, every screen, every speaker, every household. He let them watch. He let them see what their warriors had done to human children, to human families, and to a world that had never raised a hand against anyone. Then silence. 5 full minutes of silence, while the footage played on a loop. Then Marcus spoke. His voice was calm. It carried no hatred. It carried something worse, certainty. You have 12 hours to surrender your military command. Every ship, every weapon, every officer involved in the attack on Eden's reach. This is not a negotiation. This is not a discussion. This is a courtesy that you did not extend to our children. 12 hours. After that, we will come and take them ourselves. He closed the channel. The bridge was silent. Outside, the fleet waited. On the surface below, 9 billion Verath looked up at the sky they could no longer see, and for the first time in their history, understood what it felt like to be helpless. The 12 hours passed in silence. Marcus Cole did not repeat his message. He did not send reminders. He did not threaten or bluster or explain. The fleet hung in the sky above Verath Prime like a held breath, and the planet below waited. 9 billion Verath looked up at the wall of human warships and experienced something their culture had no framework to process. They were a species built on strength, on dominance, on the absolute certainty that might was the only truth that mattered. And now, they were staring at a might so far beyond their own that it made everything they believed feel like a children's game. When the 12th hour came and went, The answer came not from the Verath government, but from Drael Kethar himself. He appeared on an open broadcast, tall, armored, his compound eyes burning with a fury that was almost indistinguishable from desperation. He declared that surrender was impossible. He declared that the Verath would fight to the last soldier. He called upon every ship, every warrior, every civilian with a weapon to defend the homeworld. It was exactly what Marcus had expected. The last stand of the Verath Dominion lasted less than a day. Drael Kethar had gathered everything he had left, roughly 400 warships, most of them damaged from earlier engagements, held together with emergency repairs and crewed by exhausted soldiers. They formed a defensive sphere around Verath Prime and waited for the humans to come. The humans came. The battle was brutal, but short. The Verath fought with the wild courage of a cornered animal, ramming their ships into Terran formations, launching suicide attacks, throwing everything they had into a wall that did not bend. Terran losses were real this time. 37 ships destroyed, over 2,000 crew killed. Marcus felt each loss like a knife in his chest. He did not flinch, he did not stop. Within hours, the Verath fleet was broken. Burning hulks drifted in orbit around the homeworld. Escape pods tumbled through the wreckage. Then Terran search and rescue teams launched immediately, pulling Verath survivors from the debris. Enemy soldiers who had been trying to kill them minutes ago were now being given medical treatment on Terran ships. Some of the Verath did not understand. They waited for the execution that never came. Drael Kethar's flagship, the Throne of Claws, was the last to fall. Its engines were crippled, its weapons silenced, its hull breached in a dozen places. Marcus could have destroyed it. One command. One shot, and the Archon who had ordered the massacre of 14 million people would be dead. He chose not to. "Boarding teams," Marcus said. "Take the ship. Take him alive." His officers looked at him. Some of them wanted to argue. Marcus did not give them the chance. Terran Marines breached the Throne of Claws through its shattered hull. They moved through the corridors in disciplined silence, clearing rooms, securing prisoners. They found Drael Kethar on the command deck, but standing alone. His personal guard had either fled or died. He stood in the center of the room with his claws at his sides, waiting. When the Marines entered, he looked at them and said nothing. They restrained him. They did not hurt him. They brought him to the Prometheus in a shuttle, and when he was escorted onto the bridge, Marcus stood from his command chair and looked at the creature who had murdered a world. "You should have killed me," Drael Kethar said. His voice was flat, empty. No," Marcus said. "You don't get to die like a warrior. You get to live like a prisoner. You get to sit in a cell and know that everything you built is gone, and that a species you called herdlings is the reason why." The Archon said nothing. He was taken to the brig. He would not speak again for a very long time. What happened next surprised the galaxy more than the war itself. Terran soldiers landed on Verath Prime, thousands of them in full combat gear, descending from the sky in heavy transports. The Verath civilians braced themselves. They had done this to the humans, burned their world, killed their children. And now the humans were here with their armies and their ships and their terrible, quiet fury. They expected fire. They expected revenge. They expected to reap what their leaders had sown. The soldiers set up field hospitals. They distributed food rations. They established water purification stations. They dismantled military installations with careful precision, separating weapons from civilian infrastructure, making sure that power grids and communication networks remained intact. They confiscated every warship, every weapon, every piece of military hardware they could find, but they did not touch the homes. They did not touch the schools. They did not touch the civilians. A Verath elder approached a human soldier outside a supply depot. The elder was old, stooped, and her exoskeleton cracked with age. She looked at the soldier, a young woman from a city on Earth called Lagos, and asked a question that the translator rendered in a shaking voice. "Why are you helping us? We killed your people." The soldier looked at her for a long moment. Then she said, "Your leaders killed our people. You didn't. And we're not going to become what they were." The elder stood there, silent, and then lowered her head in a gesture that, in Varath culture, I meant something between gratitude and shame. The trial of Drael Kethar and his war council was held on Athavari Prime, the same station where he had once called humans soft-blooded herdlings. An interstellar tribunal was assembled, judges from 12 species, none of them human. Humanity insisted on this. They did not want justice to look like revenge. Lena Okoro was called to testify, and she walked to the witness stand carrying her data pad, the same one she had carried through the tunnels of Greenfield Primary, the same one that held every second of the horror. She was calm. Her voice was steady. She played the footage for the tribunal. She described what she had seen, what she had heard, what she had smelled. She described the children she had saved and the ones she had not. And she described the sound of Varath boots above the tunnel and the silence that followed the bombardment. And then she did something that no one expected. She began to read names, the names of the dead, all 14 million of them. It took 3 days. She stood at that podium for 3 days, reading name after name after name, stopping only to drink water and to let her voice recover. The tribunal did not interrupt her. The chamber was silent, and delegates from across the galaxy sat and listened as a single human woman read the names of her dead, one by one, into the record of history. When she finished, she looked at Drael Kethar, who had been forced to sit through every moment, and said, "These were not soldiers. These were not threats. These were people, and you will remember them." She stepped down. The chamber did not move for several minutes. The Drael Kethar and 17 members of his war council were found guilty of crimes against sentient life. They were sentenced to permanent confinement. No execution. Humanity did not believe in killing prisoners. The punishment was existence, to live with what they had done, forever, in a cell where the only entertainment was a screen that played Lena's footage on an endless loop. The Galactic Concord was forced to look at itself. In the weeks that followed the trial, a reckoning swept through the coalition. Species that had voted to investigate the massacre were publicly shamed. Treaties were rewritten. The Concord's charter was amended to include automatic military response protocols for attacks on civilian populations. It was too late for Eden's Reach, but it was not too late for the next world. Ilara Voss, Officer Voss, as she now insisted on being called, addressed the Concord one final time. She stood in the same chamber where she had spent 20 years being polite, being patient, being everything the galaxy had asked her to be. She looked older now, harder, but her voice was the same, clear, steady, and absolutely certain. "You built a system that rewards the loudest voice and ignores the quietest suffering," she said. "We played by your rules for 60 years. We were kind, we were patient, we shared everything we had, and you let our children burn. At Concord, we will continue to build. We Concord, we will continue to build. We will continue to heal. We will continue to offer our hand to anyone who reaches for it. But hear me clearly, every single one of you, never again mistake our mercy for weakness. We chose to be civilized. We chose diplomacy. We chose peace, and we can make a different choice. You have seen what that looks like. So the next time a species burns a human world and you consider voting to investigate, remember Cythera Rift. Remember what 12 minutes looked like, and ask yourselves if an investigation is really what you want." She straightened her uniform. "We are done being civilized on your terms. From now on, we will be civilized on ours." She walked out. No one followed. No one spoke. Marcus Cole returned to Eden's Reach 6 months later. The planet was being rebuilt. New towns rose from the ashes. Forests were being replanted. Rivers ran clear again, though the soil beneath them was still black in places and would be for decades. A memorial had been built where Greenfield Primary once stood. It was simple. A long stone wall, curved in a gentle arc, with 14 million names carved into its surface. The letters were small, so small you had to stand close to read them. But every name was there, every single one. Marcus walked along the wall. He ran his fingers across the names. He found the section for Millhaven and read the names of the children who had been in Lena's classroom, the ones she had saved and the ones she had not. He found Thomas, the boy who had asked when his mother was coming. He stood there for a long time. The wind blew across the fields. New grass, still short, still fragile, but green, alive, growing. He placed his palm flat against the wall. The stone was warm from the sun, and for the first time since he had walked into that burned schoolroom on the worst day of his life, Marcus Cole allowed himself to close his eyes, lower his head, and grieve. Decades later, an alien historian from a species known for their obsessive neutrality sat in a library on a quiet world and wrote an entry for the Galactic Encyclopedia of Sentient Species. The entry was short because the historian believed that truth did not need many words. It read, "Of all the species in the known galaxy, humans remain the most paradoxical. They are the first to offer a hand, the last to raise a fist. They built their reputation on compassion, and when that compassion was answered with slaughter, they revealed a capacity for war so absolute it reshaped the political order of the galaxy in a matter of weeks. They could have destroyed the Verath. They chose not to. They could have ruled through fear. They chose not to. And they returned to their schools, their farms, their hospitals, and their habit of meddling in everyone's problems with unsolicited kindness. The lesson of Eden's Reach is simple, and every species in the Concord would do well to remember it. Humans do not start wars, but they end them. And they decide how those wars end, not you." The historian paused, considered, and added one final line. "Be grateful they still choose mercy, and pray they always do."